Hello, thanks for stopping by. In this video, I'm going to be creating a peaceful mountain scene birthday card. So let's get into it. This is going to be my color palette for the card. With the exception of the red tone, each of these colors will form one layer in my mountain scene. I'll also be using an off-white cream colored cardstock for the card base of the card, just a really nice neutral background. And to create some interest behind the mountain scene, I am going to die cut this basket weave die directly into the front of the card base. I'm going to go ahead and tape it down and run it through my die cutting machine, and you can sort of see the texture on both the inside and the outside of the card, which I think is kind of fun and unique. This die cut shape is going to form the base for the mountain scene. Basically, I'll be layering these different scene dies that I have. So I have some hills and some flowers and some mountains, and they're all going to layer with a different color of cardstock, building this scene around this sort of shape. To create this scene, I'm going to first die cut the die cut shape out of plain white cardstock, and this will form the base of the mountain scene. And then I am going to use the die cut shape to die cut a piece of colored cardstock. So I'm starting with the front layers first, so the layers that are most in the foreground of the scene. And I'm gonna die cut that shape. It doesn't have to be the full shape because we're gonna cut the edge out of our mountain scene. So in this case, I'm using the darkest of the two yellows, and I'm going to use this sort of flower meadow type die, and I'm gonna line it up on the edge, so like how much I want to be seen of the yellow. That's kind of where I'm deciding where to place this die cut and then run it through my die cutting machine. So now I have the nice edge shape, so that will line up perfectly with our white shape that we've already cut out, and then I have the sort of florals on the top border of the meadows. Next, I'm going to do the same thing with the second color of yellow cardstock. I'm going to cut the shape out first, and then I'm going to line it up with our previous die cut. This will form the second layer in our scene, and I'm going to end up using the same die, just sort of a different positioning in a different place within that die, to create a second layer of sort of these flower meadow type scenes. So I'll lay that down and making sure that first piece is still there, so I know exactly how much will be seen behind that darker yellow. And now I have my second piece after running it through my die cutting machine, and this bottom edge will line up perfectly with our first die cut piece, and so it sort of forms sort of that second layer. And I'm gonna go ahead and repeat that with the remaining layers. So I'm transitioning from the yellows into the green tones, and these are gonna form hills behind our yellow color cardstock. So I'm gonna repeat this process for the remaining hill layers, cutting it out of the lightest green cardstock, then the middle tone, and then the dark tone. So we'll have 3 hills. And the process is the exact same as the yellow images, just cutting out the shape and then lining up the previous layers to then determine what that last layer will be and sort of forming that hill line. Once I've cut out the hills, I'm going to transition away from the greens and into the blue tones, and the blue tones are going to form the mountains of our mountain scene. So starting out with the lighter blue tone, I'm going to cut out, one set of mountains, and then for the darker tone, I'm cutting out the shape, and it's going to be a full shape this time because I'm not exactly sure how tall I want my mountains to be quite yet. And at this point, I stop because I'm actually going to put a little A-frame cabin in the scene. And so in order to get the positioning right, I didn't want there to be, you know, a mountain peak right above and of the top of the cabin. You know, I wanted there some variation in the different heights, and so it didn't seem like they're all pointing in the same direction at the same point. So I'm using this A-frame cabin that I have cut out of that cream colored cardstock, so a neutral tone, to try to find the placement of where I want that cabin to go. And then I can determine where I want my next layer of mountains to be die cut out of. Again, trying to avoid, you know, too many sort of points in one location. So I'll go ahead and die cut that layer out of the darker blue tone, and that will form the last layer in our mountain scene. Now onto our final color of the color palette. I'm going to be cutting the roof for the cabin and the door for the cabin out of the red colored cardstock. I'm going to be coloring the solid triangle with some Distress Oxide tumbled glass ink to sort of give the appearance of windows. For fully white panel, I am going to be ink blending a sky scene. So I laid down the last layer just to know where exactly I need to start my ink blending. And then I'm going to ink blend starting with the lightest color and then moving up to the darkest color. And this is my absolute favorite ink blending combination for sky. So I'm using Distress Oxide inks in Worn Lipstick, Saltwater Taffy, Picked Raspberry, Seedless Preserves, and Chipped Sapphire. So I'm laying down, you know, one layer of ink and then going back over with whatever is remaining on my ink blending brushes there, trying to make sure that the sky is nice and blended and it looks sort of like a night scene. You know, the sun is setting and, you know, these warm pinks and purples are lighting up the sky. Now I'm going to be gluing everything together. So I'm starting by gluing my two triangles for the A-frame cabin, and then the roof, and followed by the door. And then I'm going to glue each of the layers of the mountain scenes, starting with the last layer, the layer that is furthest from, you know, the viewpoint. And it's pretty easy to line up. That's why we use this sort of shape, is to line it up, and then even flipping it over just to make sure that the pieces are lined up pretty nicely. And then I'll add each of the remaining layers. It was at this point that I started contemplating exactly where I wanted to put the A-frame, and I decided I wanted to put it slightly tucked behind that middle green hill, but I wanted it to look like it wasn't completely covered by the hill, like the door looked like it opened right along the hill, so I ended up having to cut out some additional shapes in order to find the exact right hill line that I wanted. And once I figured that out, I continued to glue the pieces down. I'm gluing the yellows together and then the yellows to the lightest green. And then I'll go ahead and add the lightest green to that middle green that I eventually decided. I think I ended up cutting out 3 or 4 additional hills before I determined exactly which one I wanted. I'm gonna add some glue here, but I'm gonna leave some space so that I can tuck my my A-frame cabin right behind there pretty easily. I also added some glue onto the back of my A-frame, which I didn't show, but it is there on the screen right now. And then I'm gonna go ahead and tuck the A-frame cabin right in that space where I didn't have any glue behind that hill. And just making sure that it looks like it belongs there, not too much is covered up, but it's kind of like nestled in between those hills. And that sort of finishes the scene. I then decided I wanted to add some clouds just to give it some more interest. And I had previously die cut some extras for another project that I had worked on, so I ended up just using these clouds here. But I went ahead and used the background of my card panel to make sure they didn't hang off the edge, but I did want them to hang off of that shaped seam. And in order to tuck this one cloud right behind the hill, I sort of pulled up that cardstock a little bit and then added some glue on that mountain piece again, and then on the cloud itself, and then just kind of pushed everything down to make sure it was secure. And then I'm adding a little gold metallic embellishment for the door handle of the A-frame cabin. To turn this into a birthday card, I stamped a teeny tiny happy birthday on the hill. It's just a tone-on-tone happy birthday. It is very subtle, but I think it fits well. And then on the inside of the card, to sort of bring in the whole mountain peaceful cabin scene, I am stamping in this additional sentiment that says, "Hope your day is filled with peace and quiet," which I think is perfect for our little mountain scene. And finally, I will be gluing the scene directly onto the card base. And I'm not adding any additional embellishments here. I really want the scene to speak for itself. And this is the finished card. So we have our nice layered mountain scene, lots of dimension here, and our nice happy birthday sentiment with our inside sentiment that ties it all together. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video inspirational. If you like this video, check out some of my other card making videos, including this one that's also a shaped scene card.